Welcome to our podcast series, Rabia Jaberi Agha, who is also the chairperson of National Commission on Human Rights, और journalist भी रही हैं, and she has a lot of work to her credit. हमारी पूरी जो बातचीत होगी वो कोशिश करेंगे कि उर्दू में हो, but we can keep it bilingual, ताकि ज़्यादातर लोगों को समझ में आए. तो राबिया, मैंने थोड़ा सा तारुफ आपको करा दिया, कुछ तारुफ आप खुद अपना करा दीजिए.
थैंक यू तस्नीम, आपने हमें मौका दिया कि मैं इस शो में आपके आऊँ. मैं जब मैं कॉलेज से वापस आई थी तो पहले डॉन न्यूज़पेपर ज्वाइन किया था, और मैं डॉन में पहली औरत थी जिसमें न्यूज़ डेस्क में काम किया था. उस वक्त कोई औरतें न्यूज़ डेस्क पे नहीं थी, औरतें ज़्यादातर मैगजीन्स में काम करती थी, और एक जो वीकली आते थे न्यूज़पेपर्स या इवनिंग गर्ल्स, उन पे काम करती थी, मगर औरतें न्यूज़ डेस्क पे नहीं होती थी. तो वो एक पहला मेरा कदम था. एक कंप्लीटली मेल डोमिनेटेड बड़ा इंटेंस और प्रेशर वाली नौकरी थी हमारी डॉन में जब मैंने काम किया था. उसके बाद फिर थोड़ा सा मैं जर्नलिज्म से मेरा थोड़ा सा दिल भर गया था. मैं समझ रही कि हम लोग सिर्फ शिकायतें करते, मगर कुछ हमें, उस जमाने जिया उल हक का भी जमाना था, मुश्किल जमाना था जर्नलिस्ट के लिए, और एक लेवल ऑफ फ्रस्ट्रेशन हो गई थी. तो मैंने कहा लेट मी ट्राई एंड जॉइन. मेरे भाई ने बहुत मुझे सॉर्ट ऑफ प्रेशर किया कि ज्वाइन करो, कोशिश करो गवर्नमेंट में अगर तुम्हें, हालांकि हमारे खानदान में कोई गवर्नमेंट में नहीं है. But then I joined the government, and I found equally difficult constraints with working within the government, because उस जमाने में कोई हमारे 250 मेल काउंटरपार्ट्स थे in different services, और हम 2 औरतें थी जो डिस्ट्रिक्ट मैनेजमेंट उस जमाने में कहते थे, अभी पीएस कहते हैं. तो हम 2 औरतें थी, तो वहाँ भी एक सॉर्ट ऑफ एटमॉस्फेयर ये था कि it was very gender imbalanced. I must say people were very supportive, but it was very gender imbalanced. और हमारे पास कोई सीनियर्स नहीं थे, मेंटर्स नहीं थे. हमने अपना रास्ता खुद बनाना था, हमने अपनी अच्छे वक्त बुरे वक्त सबको हमने खुद समझना था. So basically that was how I went into the government. And my interest has always been socio-economic development, from the time as a journalist to my time in the government. वहाँ से मैं retire होके then I applied to join the National Commission for Human Rights, because I had been working on human rights, and I thought this was a new way. So this was a third way of entering a profession really that still is looking at addressing human issues. And now I am the chairperson of the National Commission on Human Rights.
Right. Okay. So you obviously started off as a journalist, and I think wherever you went, journalism stays with you, obviously, as a reader, as a viewer. वो आपके साथ साथ चलती रहती है, वो आपको छोड़ती नहीं है. तो क्योंकि हमारा ये पूरा पॉडकास्ट का जो सिलसिला है वो एक हमने इनिशिएटिव लिया है कंस्ट्रक्टिव जर्नलिज्म को पाकिस्तान में इंट्रोड्यूस करने का, कि हम किस तरह से जो हमारी मंडेन किस्म की रोज़ाना की रिपोर्टिंग और रोज़ाना की जो टॉक शोज और सारा कुछ होता है उससे हट के थोड़ा सा हम कहीं कोई कंस्ट्रक्टिव, कोई रे ऑफ होप, कोई सोल्यूशन ओरिएंटेड बात भी करें. सो आपने पहले कभी सुना है, हैव यू एवर हर्ड अबाउट कंस्ट्रक्टिव जर्नलिज्म? ये कॉन्सेप्ट इसका कुछ फेमिलियर है आपके लिए?
जी, मैंने सुना है. देखिए, कंस्ट्रक्टिव जर्नलिज्म और ये सोल्यूशन जर्नलिज्म भी कहते हैं. These are all high sounding constructs, but basically what they're trying to say is that जब आप एक स्टोरी को रिपोर्ट करते हैं तो आप सिर्फ एक सेंसेशनल स्टोरी को उस टाइम पे रिपोर्ट ना करें, but try and create some kind of constructive dialogue and try and create hope, try and create not just एक negative आपने reporting की ये खराब है, ये खराब है, ये अच्छा है, but don't overemphasize the negative. Move towards a shift that leaves the viewer with some sense of hope, some sense of motivation, that gives the viewer a feeling that it's better, the world is not full of despair. And I think जब आप constructive journalism की बात करते हैं तो it is really a philosophy. वो जब हम भी काम करते हैं कमीशन में ह्यूमन राइट्स के बारे में, तो we see very bad and hard things. So are we just to drown in despair and to drown in the negativity that we see around us, or are we supposed to look at the future and try and advocate change? And I think ये एक philosophy है, from moving from what is really just sensational to a sort of social activism. And वो जो आप बात करते हैं, constructive journalism, constructive professionalism, constructive is the word. How do you provide a fair, accurate picture of the world, and how do you leave the audience not completely broken down? How do you leave them with some sense of hope or motivation? So that is how I understand it. Of course, it may be more complex, but that is how I see it from my
I think
perspective.
you actually have explained it very, very concisely and in a very effective manner, that don't leave the audience in despair, because I know a lot of people have stopped reading newspapers. They've actually stopped watching television because they say there's so much of chaos, there's so much of repetitive vengeance that goes on, one blaming the other. It's always the blame game. Everything is politicized, even the floods or COVID, or everything is politicized. So it's better not to watch. So it's also escapism on part of a lot of people, but it's also, I think, for their own sanity, कि वो चाहते ही नहीं है कि उनके दिमाग पे इतना बोझ है, बिकॉज बोझ ऑलरेडी एक आम आदमी पे बहुत ज्यादा है, मर्द या औरत, जो हमारी इकोनॉमिक कंडीशंस हैं, जो हमारे ग्राउंड रियलिटीज हैं इस वक्त बहुत सारी चीजों की, तो वो नहीं चाहते कि उसमें ऐड ऑन हो, ये रोजाना की जो लड़ाई झगड़े वो टीवी पे देखना नहीं चाहते. सो यू हैव एक्चुअली पुट इट वेरी वेरी वेल, दैट टू रिपोर्ट ऑन इश्यूज बट फ्रॉम एन एंगल जहाँ पे कोई थोड़ा सा सोल्यूशन, थोड़ी सी होप, थोड़ा सा लोगों को पता चले कि हाँ ये चीजें हैं. हम ये नहीं कह रहे कि नहीं है. We are not putting things under the carpet. We are not sort of going into a denial mode. We are saying कि हैं, but इसको हम थोड़ा सा अगर दूसरा एंगल से देखें तो रिजॉल्व भी हो सकती है. And then I'll come to your own commission, which is obviously on human rights, and human rights is a huge canvas. अब उसके अंदर रह के आप क्या कुछ कर सकती हैं, आपने अभी तक क्या कुछ किया है, एंड हाउ डू यू थिंक के लोगों तक वो चीज पहुंची है या नहीं जो आप कर रही हैं? फॉर एग्जाम्पल, अभी डोमेस्टिक वायलेंस पे आपकी बहुत बड़ी कॉन्फ्रेंस भी हुई, सब कुछ हुआ, वो कितने लोगों तक पहुंचे? डिड द मेन स्ट्रीम मीडिया एक्सेप्ट कि उन्होंने वो सब दिखाया कि हाँ, मिनिस्टर्स भी आए, सब लोग आए, उन्होंने तकरीरें की, कोई प्रोग्राम, कोई इन डेप्थ कॉन्वर्सेशन हुई इसके ऊपर?
Thank you. देखिए, तस्नीम, I want to keep clarifying, commission is not the government.
Yep.
The government is the supreme authority which has to redress and protect human rights in the country. वो तो उनका काम है. हमारा काम बहुत एक तौर पे, it's very much like journalism. What does journalism do? Journalism says कि ये government policy में खामी है, ये gap है, ये एक immediate problem है, ये एक action लेना चाहिए. ठीक है, हम भी यही कहते हैं. हम भी ये कहते हैं कि the government, the media is like a checkpoint to ensure that the government does its job. And in that same way, we are also like that checkpoint. Our point is to point out a problem in either a policy or a law or a direction, institutional direction the government has taken, and say, okay, this is either defective, this needs to be made, or this needs to be fixed. So we are the watchdog of the government. जो आप जिसकी आप बात कर रहे थे, डोमेस्टिक वायलेंस, अब देखिए, हमारे पास कमीशन के अपने इख्तियारात ये हैं कि हम वी आर आल्सो सिविल कोर्ट, तो वी कैन एड्रेस इंडिविजुअल कंप्लेंट्स, वी कैन इंटरवीन इन अ केस. अगर कोई, जैसे कि आपको शायद याद है, उस्मान मिर्जा का केस था जिसमें उन्हें एक रेप हुई थी, उसमें about 3 months or 4 months after the case were registered, वो जो कपल थी वो बैक आउट हो गई, वो कॉम्प्रोमाइज हो गई फॉर वट एवर रीजन. उन्होंने कहा कि जी हम है ही नहीं. तो we intervened as a party and said we want to be a party in this case to ensure that, and we had those powers. और पहली चीज हमने गवर्नमेंट को ये बताई कि देखें, आपकी कन्विक्शन रेप में और इस किस्म के तशद्दुद में 0.4% is your conviction rate. औरतें हर वक्त in this long process, which is so difficult to investigate rape and to go on to, औरतों के लिए बहुत ही challenging है एक मर्द का total atmosphere in court. कोई पढ़ा लिखा बंदा भी जाए तो confuse हो जाए, तो आप छोटे कोई गरीब आदमी जिसको इल्म नहीं है, एक औरत जो कभी इस माहौल में नहीं गई है. So what we told the government was, you have witness protection program. Why don't you use it? Why don't you use it in rape cases? Why do people come? So we identified a problem. Now in the domestic violence, हमने ये देखा कि हमारे पास domestic violence के cases आते हैं, मगर cases register नहीं होते. Cases आते हैं, मगर इस्लामाबाद जो आपका federal capital है, वहाँ कानून नहीं है. अब ये कैसे हो सकता है कि आपको ये कानून नहीं है, और जब आप एक असॉल्ट केस करते हो तो आप पीपीसी के थ्रू करते हो. देयर इज नो सेपरेट केस ऑफ देयर इज नो सेपरेट लॉ ऑन डोमेस्टिक वायलेंस. तो हमारी ऑडियंस इस वक्त पार्लियामेंट थी. हमने पार्लियामेंट को बुलाया कि देखिए हमारी ऑडियंस बोलती कि हमने उनको कहा कि ये कानून साजी की जरूरत है. आप लोग आके समझे कि ये इस्लाम के खिलाफ कहीं नहीं लिखा इस्लाम में कि आप अपनी बीवी को मारें. So we have different audiences, but our main mandate is to ensure that the government does its job. A government is constrained by the Constitution of Pakistan, it's constrained by domestic legislation, and it's constrained by international treaties. और जब वो गवर्नमेंट उसके कंप्लायंस नहीं करता तो हमारा काम है कि हम गवर्नमेंट को आगाही दें और बोले कि एक्सक्यूज मी, आपने ये काम करना है. एंड ऑल दैट इज रिलेटेड टू द इम्पैक्ट ऑफ ह्यूमन राइट्स. सो ऑफ कोर्स हम लोग वी आर वेरी न्यू, हम 1 साल से आए हुए थे, उससे पहले 2.5 साल की एक गैप आई थी, तो इतने लोगों को शायद पता ना हो, मगर हमारा काम है कि हम एक दरवाजा खुला रखें. कोई कंप्लेंट दर्ज करना चाहे तो 100 बिस्मिल्लाह जरूर आए, दर्ज करें. कोई हमें खुद खामियां नजर आए गवर्नमेंट में कि हम कह, जैसे इस्लामाबाद में मेंटल हेल्थ लॉ नहीं है. आए दिन कोई बंदा अपना एक थेरेपी वर्क्स या थेरेपी सेंटर या थेरेपी एडवाइस या कोई भी नॉन गवर्नमेंट साइकोलॉजिकल एडवाइस दे सकता है, उसकी कोई रेगुलेशन नहीं होती. तो हमने गवर्नमेंट के साथ विद एनजीओस, वी वर्क विद एनजीओस बिकॉज वी वेरी लिमिटेड इन कैपेसिटी, सो वी रिलाई ऑन एनजीओस. तो तस्कीन एक एनजीओ था, उनके साथ हमने काम किया. हमने एक ड्राफ्ट बिल भी बना दिया और हमने ये कहा है कि प्लीज आप देखिए कि कोई भी बंदा उठ के कहे कि जी मैं थेरेपी कर सकता हूँ या मैं काउंसलिंग कर सकता हूँ, उसके क्या रेगुलेशन या पैरामीटर्स होने चाहिए. हमारे पास केस आए जिसमें एक औरत को पकड़ के कैद कर लिया एक सेंटर ने. So we look at these problems from that perspective. And in that way, we're very similar to the media, that we are watchdogs over government policies.
हाँ, बट मेरा जो एक और इसमें इसी से जुड़ा सवाल था कि whatever you are doing, whatever you know the commission is doing and achieving, do you feel कि मीडिया में उसकी कोई रिफ्लेक्शन आ रही other than the event being reported? मैं उस पे ज्यादा थी कि एज एन इवेंट तो रिपोर्ट हो जाती हैं चीजें, बट कोई आपको इन डेप्थ कॉन्वर्सेशन नजर आती है इलेक्ट्रॉनिक मीडिया पे?
थोड़ी बहुत नजर आती है तस्नीम, थोड़ी बहुत नजर आती है. सच बोलूं तो मुझे सपोर्ट मिला है मीडिया से, मैं क्यों गलत बोलूं. ऑफ कोर्स इन पाकिस्तान देयर इज so much emphasis on political reporting. That is the main crux of everything. And there's a great because politics is about sensationalism, it's about personalities, it's about, you know, very strong views. So obviously that has the most priority, and also it sells. Journalism is also about businesses now. Media houses are controlled by businesses. So yes, हमें जाहिरी बात है पॉलिटिकल डायलॉग पे बहुत ज्यादा एम्फेसिस होता है और ह्यूमन राइट्स और दूसरे डायलॉग्स पे कम होता है. मगर कमीशन को पसे, as far as the commission is concerned, I think we have been able to get a strong voices speaking out in issues that we have brought forward. मैं क्यों झूठ बोलूं, हमें सपोर्ट तो अच्छा मिला है मीडिया से.
From the mainstream media या आपको या social media or both?
Both. But obviously, again, I can't say that human rights is the main focus of media. The main focus of media in Pakistan is politics.
Mhm.
And that's what sells the bucks. But at the same time, I must say that the commission has been supported by I mean, even today, the forum जिसमें आपने हमें एक मौका दिया कि हम बात करें, there is, and also I found that the media has approached the commissions oftentimes, although we don't have a great database, but they have approached us to, to get facts or to get information or to get clarity on certain subjects. And whatever we have been able to give them, we have given.
So you feel there is an interest, but obviously with limited resources, you can't actually go beyond a certain level. But media certainly can play a very important role in promoting or even just taking forward what the commission is doing, and letting people know that there is this body which is there for you people, for the people of Pakistan. मैं इससे थोड़ा सा इसको connect करूंगी with the floods that happened last year, and what kind of role did you see for yourself at that time? What kind of role did commission play or could play at that time?
Well, the commission, the floods were 33 million people. The commission is literally 5 people. So I don't think we could play a really strong role in implementing anything. In my own capacity, I was very involved because Lower Sindh had been badly affected. I saw the status of how things were, and जिस हाल में लोग रह रहे थे, सड़क जो ऊपर जो इनका जो सड़क है वो थोड़ी सी ऊंची होती है बंद की तरह, वहां लोगों के लिए अपने तंबू लगाए हुए थे। शुरू में तो आसमान तले बैठे थे बच्चे, सबको वो ट्रेंच फुट कहते हैं ना, जिसमें पानी में आप पैर डालते हैं तो अजीब सा पैर हो जाता है नरम, सबके पास वो हाल था। एक मायूसी जो छा गई थी, मैं आपको बता नहीं सकती, इट वाज लाइक पोस्ट ट्रॉमेटिक शॉक। So, but our job is to, it was to tell the government that when situations like disaster happen, it's not that the disaster is not in our control, but the disaster lays a fertile ground for human rights violations. तो जब आपके पास इन्फ्लेशन 40% पे भागे है, कंज्यूमर इन्फ्लेशन, आपके पास खाना नहीं है, आपके पास रोजगारी नहीं है, आपकी जमीन पानी के नीचे डूबा हुआ है, आपके बच्चे सड़क पे भाग रहे हैं, दौड़ रहे, कोई स्कूल ना अस्पताल, कोई कॉन्सेप्ट ही नहीं है, so that's the time when you'll be frustrated and beat your wife. That is the time you'll get your daughters married early. That is the time you'll send your children to child labor. So the idea is to put the focus on the problems that will happen post disaster, in any disaster. And that is what we did, was to keep on telling the government, okay, look at these issues that will turn up. These are issues you need to look at. And in the same way, the media did it. But unfortunately, I think that really the elephant in the room was Pakistan's economy and the floods. And I don't think enough was talked about it. I really don't think enough was talked about it. I think we were so consumed, the media was so consumed in every day is a new crisis. Every day there is, unfortunately in Pakistan, we are going through possibly one of our most difficult times. There is political polarization, there is disregard of the law, there's challenge to the writ of the state. हर बंदा चाहता है उठ के कुछ भी कर सकता है। आप देखें पाकिस्तान में जो मॉब वायलेंस है, जो जिस हद से बढ़ गई है, लोग तो कहते हैं कि कानून पे तो जाते ही नहीं है, अदालतों में तो जाते ही नहीं है, उठाए तो किसी को मार दिया, तो किसी को जला दिया, तो किसी को पुलिस स्टेशनों से निकाल दिया। So there is a huge time, and I think ये आपने जो ये फोरम किया कंस्ट्रक्टिव जर्नलिज्म टू, पाकिस्तान में एक बहुत बड़ा डिवाइड हो गया है, us and them. And this us and them is not going to get better unless there is both the government and all supporting agencies, the media and the commissions, work together to create some bridge this divide and create a culture of tolerance. There is so much intolerance in Pakistan. शहजाद रोय बड़े अच्छी तरीके से कहता है बचपन में माँ बाप मारते हैं, बड़े होते स्कूल मारते हैं, बड़े होते उससे बड़ा पुलिस स्टेशन में मारते हैं, हर जगह ये टॉलरेंस, लैक ऑफ टॉलरेंस है कि हम किसी की कोई राय हमारे से मुख्तलिफ उसको दो थप्पड़ मार लेते हैं. So how do you do it? And ये जो, to go back to the circle that you started, constructive journalism is improve the communication, create forums of dialogue. And I think the journalists must create, when in their role, particularly electronic media में, to try and create a respectful interaction. भाई आपका मुझसे मुख्तलिफ राय है, ठीक है, मेरी आपसे मुख्तलिफ. How do we create respectful interaction rather than एक दूसरे को हम अटैक करें या कोई vicious aggressive interaction हो? How does the media, and I think one thing I would like to say that I think the media is becoming aware. मैं देख रही थी कि training of journalists is now, not everybody is trained, but there's a training of journalism. There is a need, there's an understanding that journalists need to be trained. जो Center of Excellence of Journalism में है, is playing a strong role in trying to bring people, sensitize them to their ethical and moral duty in trying to create. Of course, सर आपको reporting जरूर करें, but create a respectful interaction. And that is very, very important. A culture of tolerance. How do we do that? Otherwise, we will completely just become, जैसे कहते हैं ना कि हम लोग uncivilized, हम बिल्कुल जाहिल जैसे society हो जाएगी. But there's no sense of tolerance and harmony.
Yeah, you were very right. Ki trainings do matter, and they at times do help, because AX has been training journalists for the past 25 years on gender issues,
Yes.
especially, और उससे कुछ ना कुछ फायदा हुआ है. We see a difference, but obviously not to the scale that we would have liked to. But yes, there is an understanding of gender issues. There's a better understanding of gender issues than 98 when I started. People do respect certain ethical issues. हमारा code of ethics जो है उसको भी समझते हैं कि don't put the picture of a survivor or a victim, blur it, stuff like that. तो वो थोड़ा बहुत अब honor killing को कैसे आपने report करना है, तो वो थोड़ा. But it took us almost like 25 years to get it drilled into the minds of the media. Gender matters and gender issues must be taken up very, very sensitively. So definitely, but the thing is also that when we invite people for trainings, I mean, it is reporters. We do a lot of on-desk trainings where we go to the newsrooms and talk to the people. And then we also involve the upper tier, because they are the decision makers, the editors, the bureau chiefs. मगर उसमें फिर ये होता है कि there's always a feeling कि जी उनके पास time बहुत कम है. At the top level, they are so busy कि वो आपको मुश्किल से आधा घंटा देंगे. आधे घंटे में you can't sort of change the scenario. आप बेशक रिपोर्टर्स की आप 10 साल ट्रेनिंग्स कर दें, reporters will only be reporting, but the stuff will go on the desk, and if the news editor does not think the report worth printing, that will go in a trash. So there is a chain. अब उस chain को continuously आपने in loop रखना है, of training, of making them understand the need of the time. Constructive journalism की हमने जब बात की with editors and all, they said कि ये तो हो ही नहीं सकता, पाकिस्तान में तो नहीं हो सकता, because this sounds more like a promotional thing. Constructive का मतलब तो ये है कि आप सब कुछ अच्छा दिखाएं, कुछ बुरा ना दिखाएं. So it's taken us, this is the second year that we're doing the same project. It's taken us time to make them understand कि ये वो नहीं है जो आप समझ रहे. It means कि थोड़ा सा अपना thinking pattern shift कर लें from so much of negativity. For example, every talk show, there will be people from different political parties. And whenever there's an issue, they'll all go into the history. कि आपने ये किया था, आपने ये किया था. So I think the role of the anchor at that time is to interrupt and say, these are the things of the past, let's move on. Let's talk about the future. Let's talk about the present. वो हमारे यहाँ नहीं हो रहा है. So how do you think कि हम इस पूरे माइंडसेट को चेंज कर सकते हैं जो ब्लेम गेम का हमारे यहाँ चल रहा होता है 24/7? वी जस्ट हियर अबाउट आपने ये किया था, हमने ये किया, आपने ये किया. So obviously two wrongs don't make one right. So ये चीज हम कैसे लोगों को समझा सकते हैं?
देखिए, if you study McCarthyism in the 1900s in USA, there was this huge divide between society, and everybody was fighting with the other person, ke you're a traitor, or you're a traitor, you're a traitor. And this sense of divide was so strong that that entire country was really suffering from this sort of witch hunt. And I think in Pakistan, in some ways, we are at a McCarthy point in life, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of blame game. जैसे आप बिल्कुल सही कह रही हैं कि तुम गद्दार हो, तुम गद्दार हो, तुम, it's like getting at the core now. There is no, this situation, and this is my biggest fear, is अगर आप मुझसे पूछें कि पाकिस्तान में सब चीज छोड़ दें आप, रेप, चाइल्ड मोलेस्टेशन, uneducation, economy, I think the root is intolerance. The root of everything, the root of rape, the root of child abuse, the root of child labor is intolerance. And intolerance and an abuse of power. Even in rape, it's a power play. It's all about power dynamics, right? And therefore, this is something that the government, NGOs, civil society must work to bridge this horrible gap. And once you bridge the gap, you will address intolerance. अगर मुझे पता है कि आप मुख्तलिफ मुझसे नहीं हैं और आप भी मेरी तरह एक इंसान, औरत हैं, आप भी वही कर रही हैं जो मैं कर रही हूँ, तो वो level of intolerance, that once you bridge that divide, you will bring down the temperature of intolerance. And that is the only way to do it is in really 2-3 ways. एक तो dialogue करें, जो आपके मुखालिफ उनके साथ dialogue करें. इसमें बहुत मीडिया का एक अहम किरदार है. और जैसे मैंने पहले कहा था, respectful interaction. The media should not encourage and poke them to create more divide. They should encourage them to get together, because देखिए, at the end of the day, this is about Pakistan's future. You have to also develop a working trust between people. We have lost the trust. मैं आपके ऊपर शक करती हूँ because मैं आपको एक others की तरह rely करती हूँ. If I treat you as an other, then I will always question your integrity. I'll question your, I won't trust you because I think ये मुख्तलिफ है मुझसे, मैं इसको क्यों trust करूँ? So how do you create opportunities to build working trust between people? And another thing is then, is how do you, another thing is to support the non-polarized middle. There is a middle in even within Pakistan that is neither left nor right, neither good nor bad. It's a middle. The people that are, they're few, there are more bigger, wider thinking people. They are people that are not so extremist. How do you encourage those voices to come out? So you don't, but unfortunately, because sensationalism sells, we always take X and Y directly. We don't look at the middle ground. And if journalists were to bring forward people who speak the middle voice, the voice of sanity, those people need to get exposure. That those groups of people that are actually looking to bridge dichotomy and divide, those are the people that also need a voice. Unfortunately, in Pakistan, they're very few. they're scared of coming out. They don't want, they don't have opportunities. How do you bring them forward? I think in some way your literary festivals are very good because they bring those voices out. Some people who are trying to create, make sense of, of, of the two polarized groups that exist in Pakistan. That is the arts. The arts are dying. I am really grateful that har jagah bhi literary festival ho raha hai. That's a huge thing to bring out these intellectual voices.
Yeah, yeah, and that also brings out literature and literary discourse even in interior areas. For example, Sindh mein bhi hua. So you could see कि वहाँ पे जो उनकी indigenous literature है, ये जो indigenous debate है,
Yeah,
discussion
yeah.
है, वो सामने आई, जिससे हम नहीं वाकिफ थे, जो बहुत सारे लोगों को नहीं पता था. You're very right. The thing is कि because of this over political scenario, अभी हमने इसी initiative में we trained 20 journalists on constructive journalism, and we had trainings through internationally reputed trainers, and then we asked them to share their stories. So we really had to work through the story ideas. We had a mentor who was working with them 24/7 on how to make the story more solution oriented, not just give some facts and some analysis of their own and just leave it hanging. तो वो एक बहुत बड़ा मरहला था, and luckily it worked. And I must say, I've been repeating it, that women actually did exceptionally well. The women trainees जिनको हमने train किया, because हमने कोशिश की थी कि 50-50 रखें, at least equal participation हो. And they came out with excellent stories, and whenever we told them कि जी ये इस तरह से नहीं, इस तरह से करते, they understood. On the other hand, some males wouldn't understand, especially when it came to gender issues. F9 के rape case पे एक story थी. Now the reporter didn't understand how to present it. He was presenting it as a crime reporter. I said, no, this is not the way to present it. You have to bring out a lot of voices, a lot of concerns. It's not just to take it as a case study and then put in things कि ये चीजें आगे ना हो. ऐसा क्यों है कि why do you have to say कि औरतें मगरिब की बात ना निकले, अंधेरे में ना निकले? What is it that happens? अंधेरे में मर्दों को क्या हो जाता है? Do they become like insane or something? So then put them inside. Why do you want to put women inside? So stuff like, so थोड़ी सी हमने उनकी भी कुछ brain washing सी की थी, but it's a very tough journey, Rabia, and I would like to also know from you कि पूरी जो सिचुएशन है ह्यूमन राइट्स की पाकिस्तान में, और जो हम देखते हैं कि इंटॉलरेंस जो आपने कहा, that I also feel is the main issue here, क्योंकि हम tolerance हमारे यहाँ खत्म हो चुकी है for anything. I remember growing up in an environment where we could joke about other sects and faith, and they would joke about us, and it was taken very lightly. It wasn't like anything that we would kill each other for. But we can't even say those things. We can't even utter those jokes. The thing is that when you go out, how do you defend Pakistan's human right situation abroad in different forums, in international forums? How do you, because obviously you are an independent body away from the government. So how much responsibility do you take, and how do you address those issues?
Thank you, Tasneem. Tasneem, I'd just like to go back to your point first before I get to this question, is when you talked about training. I was reading somewhere that about 50% of Pakistani journalists have ever experienced training. So there's a large gambit or a large group जिनको कभी वो opportunity नहीं मिली. और द ट्रेनिंग बहुत अहम इसलिए है कि हम लोग अपनी जिंदगियों में अपने पर्सनल पर्सपेक्टिव्स लेके आते हैं अपने जर्नलिज्म में. So when you face a debate that is in contradiction to what your beliefs are, it is very difficult to get out of that mindset, right? So it is only seasoned journalists that know that we have to step back and we have to allow the situation to be reported authentically without us putting apni rai. So, you know, for instance, in things that are very emotional, death penalty, for example, many people have very clear view that they believe or they don't believe in the death penalty. But, or abhi jo transgender bill ke upar bahut debate ho raha hai that we believe in it or we don't believe it. But how do you, and this is where your training lies, because the true journalist is the authentic journalist that looks at things in a fair manner. It's not completely, I mean, always in our lives, we are always covered by some of our beliefs. But how do you be authentic in that reporting? And another thing that journalism is plagued by is that when you cover stories, because they are human rights stories, and ye maine dekha hai ki very, they're all about power dynamics. Human right abuse often takes place in rural areas. Investigation is expensive, transport. Journalists are very pressurized by the power dynamics to report or not report. And often journalists, and this was, again, I was reading somewhere, that about 40% of journalists actually do not contact the victim. They take the story and they report it without contacting the victim. And so you somehow, and because of the dynamics, कि जाना बहुत मुश्किल है, वहाँ कोई वडेरा है, कोई कुछ है, कोई पावर प्ले है, महंगाई है, हमारे पास टाइम, जैसे आपने कहा, बहुत मुख्तसर है. So it is only this training that allows you to see things in proper perspective. And that is why I'm so grateful that Access is doing this training and creating this kind of education in which journalists have to not completely be colored by their own views, by their own dogma, their own philosophy, but be authentic to the reporting and the social milieu from which that reporting is coming. You have to be also sensitive to the area. So that is, अच्छा, फिर जो आपने एक दूसरा सवाल किया था कि how do you defend human rights? देखिए, human rights पहले तो हमारा काम नहीं है defend करना. Defending of human rights in a country is the job of the state. It is the job of the government. The job of the commission is to be fair, to report what it sees, and in that way, as I'm talking to, I'm seeing बात तो maybe खुद अक्ल आ जाती है कि there is a great correlation between the role of the media and the role of the commission, because the commission's job, the media is not to defend the government, the media, and neither is the commission's job to defend the government. The government has to stand and defend itself. The government has signed many human rights treaties. हमने CAT साइन किया, कन्वेंशन अगेंस्ट टॉर्चर, हमने CEDAW साइन किया है, राइट्स ऑफ वुमेन, चिल्ड्रन का किया है, सिविल पॉलिटिकल राइट्स किए. अब आपका काम है, आपने एक ट्रीटी साइन करी है, आपके ऊपर, आपका इख्तियार है और आप पे ऊपर लागू है कि आप वो जाके इंटरनेशनल फोरम में डिफेंड करें. हमारा काम नहीं है कमीशन का. मगर ये कहते हुए देखिए, पाकिस्तान में, दुनिया में, पूरे दुनिया में ह्यूमन राइट्स वायलेशंस हर जगह है. ये नहीं हम कह सकते कि कोई मुल्क ह्यूमन राइट्स वायलेशंस के बगैर है. और दुनिया में अभी पोलराइजेशन, पाकिस्तान में आप देख रहे हैं, हम दुनिया में बाहर भी देख रहे हैं, बहुत ज्यादा राइट और लेफ्ट विंग की पोलराइजेशन है. पाकिस्तान में चैलेंजेस ये हैं कि हमारी, unfortunately, our socio-economic situation is really at the rock bottom. We have had the floods. We have had very strong political, let's say, energy and political tensions going on. So these are not good statistics for human rights. Everything is, poverty, inflation, mob
And
violence.
COVID, let's not forget the COVID.
Let's not forget COVID. So we just feel so. Unfortunately, and it's very sad that Pakistan is really in the biggest mess it could find itself, and these are huge, huge challenges to us in the future. Economic challenges. Are we going to default? Are we not going to default? Are we going to get a loan? Are we not going to get a loan? But saying that aside, we have many good things to be grateful for. Pakistan has very strong legislations. We have the Transgender Act, which I don't know if it's going to be thrown out or not. We have a juvenile justice system. We have a separate, nowhere in the world do you have separate laws for different religions. We have a separate Hindu Marriage Act. I think the government is working on a Christian Marriage Act. In any other country, you have civil marriage, end of story, whatever religion you are. We've just approved the Deutsche Act. Now, the commission, I can say quite honestly that the government is not influencing me. We operate under the Paris principles. We are relatively independent. We have huge capacity issues. Pakistan is up to date. एक ज़माने में Pakistan treaty body reporting पे करता ही नहीं था. We were like five years behind in our reporting. Our reporting is up to date. If you look at the empowerment of women, while we have huge problems with women, I don't want to talk about them, but Pakistan, if you look at the survey, has more doctors that are women than men. We have more dentists that are women than men. We have more engineers. In our engineering universities, the first 3 posts are always taken up by women. These are good things. The registration of women voters has gone up. We have greater representation of women in parliament. So there are some good things. It's a mixed plate. But the thing is, we have to work. If we have to, Pakistan, unfortunately, everything we do is knee-jerk. हमने बहुत अच्छी कानून साजगी कर दी मगर इम्प्लीमेंटेशन जीरो. हमने बहुत अच्छा काम कर लिया BISP में, very good, we've got a database, मगर we haven't expanded additional databases. We have no data. हम कमीशन में डेटा जब ढूंढते हैं हम पागल हो जाते हैं और हम मीडिया पे रिलाय करते हैं. कोई एक सेंट्रल रिपोजिटरी नहीं है डेटा की. अगर आपकी रजिस्ट्रेशन बढ़ गई है औरतों की तो it should be better than it is. So there are huge constraints. हमने juvenile justice का एक law बनाया था जिसमें हमने कहा था कि बच्चों को जेल नहीं जाना. बच्चे must go into, जैसे बाहर दुनिया में एक होता है diversion, कि आप बच्चों को community service पे लगा लेते हैं. छोटा सा offense है, बच्चा छोटा है, उसको आप जेल के environment माहौल में नहीं डालते. अब वो इतना अच्छा कानून है, implement नहीं हो रहा. आपकी ट्रेनिंग नहीं हो रही, लोगों को पता नहीं कि डाइवर्जन किस चिड़िया का नाम है. How do we do it? So we do little things, but we don't do sustained. We don't look through things in like a supply chain in a sustained manner. And when you don't have sustainability and you don't have buy-in, it's just knee-jerk. एक कानून बहुत अच्छा बना दिया, एक ये अच्छा बना दिया, ये अच्छा. But we don't look at things. Unfortunately, that's, I don't know, our psychology. We don't look through things institutionally. How do we? अभी even हमारा commission 2 साल से बंद था. You have to ensure continuity of institutions, continuity of laws. जैसे आप training की बात कर रहे हैं, और how do you create this? How do all political parties buy in to the same continuity? You know, एक चीज करें फिर वो खत्म हो जाए फिर दूसरी कर दें. We repeat. You know, हम बहुत ज़्यादा repeat performances करते हैं. You know, we do the same thing over and over again, reinvent the wheel all the time.
Yeah, that's very true. The last comment, Rabia, I wouldn't be taking too much of your time. How do you see the way forward? You know, what should we be doing? I mean, the commission, the media, the civil society, to make things a little better, make Pakistan little more tolerant, make Pakistanis a little more tolerant towards each other? What's the way forward?
Well, I think always you have to create awareness. I think you have to tell stories about the other side. You have to be fair in telling stories that make me sympathize with who I think are my enemies. I think you need to, and I don't think it's a true fix. I sometimes think we may have lost a generation, to be very honest. I think the training of children, I mean, we're constantly being faced with textbooks, teacher, it starts really from a childhood. Teacher, that incident that happened in Faisalabad when that man was taken out of the jail and set on fire and lynched. बच्चे थे 10-10 साल के बच्चे साथ से, they were youth. How do you radicalize that youth? How do you create, because this was not how we grew up, जैसे आप सही बता रही थी. We grew up with all the religions. We grew up with Christian teachers, Parsis, the Hindu community. We grew up with like that, and we were not less Muslim. We never changed our religion. Neither were they less Christian or less Hindu. We learned to live in that state, and nobody was. Sindh is the land of Sufism, so it is a land of great tolerance. How do you bring up that? You have to keep awakening people to the humanity, I think, that exists in all of us with the same, really, essentially. But it's not an easy task. And I really think the government needs to my mind, this is the central focus of the government should be because we have this 60% youth bulge, is if this youth is going to be radical, it will destroy your country. They have to be tolerant, they have to be compassionate, and to be able to train the youth, to be able to sensitize the youth. हम तो चलो हमारी उम्रें ठीक है, मगर जो ये यूथ आ रही है इस किस्म की सिस्टम में ये मुल्क नहीं चल सकेगा.
So with the government, I think even the media and civil society have to play their roles to focus on the youth, the huge bulk that we have. Yeah. So thank you so much, Rabia. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
This will benefit a lot of people when it's put on our YouTube. And I hope whatever we've discussed will reach a larger audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you.